The bell echoed through the empty gymnasium, and Muhammad Ali realized something was terribly wrong. The sound reverberated off walls that should have been packed with screaming fans, but instead held only shadows and silence. His gloves felt heavier than they ever had. His breathing labored despite being only 3 rounds into what was supposed to be a routine sparring session. Across the ring, his opponent moved with mechanical precision, throwing combinations that seemed to anticipate every defensive move Ali made before he even thought to make them. "Time!" Ali called out, but his trainer wasn't there. The corner where Angelo Dundee should have been standing was empty, just like the rows of seats that stretched into darkness beyond the ring lights. The only sound was his own heartbeat thundering in his ears and the steady tick of a clock somewhere in the shadows. He pulled off his headgear and looked around the gym that had been his second home for decades, but nothing looked familiar anymore. The punching bags hung motionless, their leather surfaces worn smooth by countless hours of training. But they seemed different now, older somehow, as if years had passed in the span of a single round. Ali walked to the edge of the ring and peered into the darkness beyond the lights. "Hello?" he called out, his voice echoing back to him, distorted and strange. "Anybody there?" The silence that answered him was complete and absolute. Even the usual sounds of a working gym were absent. No rhythmic thudding of gloves against bags, no shuffle of feet on canvas, no voices calling out encouragement or instruction. Just the persistent ticking of that invisible clock, marking time in a world that seemed to have forgotten how to move forward. Ali climbed through the ropes and dropped to the gym floor, his legs unsteady beneath him. The concrete felt cold through his boxing shoes, and he noticed for the first time that his reflection in the mirror along the far wall looked wrong. The man staring back at him had gray at his temples and lines around his eyes that hadn't been there when he'd entered the gym that morning. Or had it been morning? The windows were covered with thick curtains, and no light penetrated from outside. He walked to the front door and tried the handle, but it wouldn't turn. The metal felt ice cold under his palm, and when he pressed his face to the small window, he saw nothing but darkness beyond. No street lights, no passing cars, no signs of life anywhere. It was as if the entire world had simply stopped existing while he was training. The clock's ticking grew louder, more insistent, and Ali turned to search for its source. He found it mounted high on the wall behind the ring, its hands moving with deliberate slowness. But as he watched, he realized the hands weren't moving forward at all. They were moving backward, unwinding the minutes and hours he had spent in this place. "This ain't right," he said aloud, his voice sounding small in the vast empty space. "This ain't right at all." He tried to remember how he had gotten here, but the memories felt slippery, like trying to hold water in his cupped hands. He remembered driving to the gym, remembered changing into his training gear, remembered stepping into the ring. But everything after that was a blur of movement and sound that didn't quite make sense when he tried to piece it together. The punching bag nearest to him began to sway slightly as if someone had just finished working on it. But there was no one there, and no breeze to explain the movement. Ali approached it cautiously, his fists still wrapped and ready. The bag's surface was warm to the touch, and he could smell the familiar scent of leather and sweat that had defined his professional life. But underneath those familiar smells was something else, something that made his stomach turn. It was the smell of time itself, musty and old and full of endings. He jerked his hand back from the bag and stumbled backward, his heart racing faster than it had during any fight. The lights above the ring began to flicker, casting dancing shadows across the empty gym. In those shadows, Ali thought he could see shapes moving, figures that looked almost familiar but dissolved into darkness whenever he tried to focus on them. He rubbed his eyes, thinking it might be fatigue or dehydration, but the shapes remained, always just at the edge of his vision. "I need to get out of here," he said. But even as the words left his mouth, he knew it wasn't that simple. The door wouldn't open. The windows showed only darkness, and the clock on the wall continued its backward march through time. He was trapped in this place, this moment, this endless round that seemed to have no beginning and no end. He climbed back into the ring, thinking that maybe if he could finish what he had started, if he could complete the training session, everything would return to normal. But as soon as his feet touched the canvas, he heard the bell again, that same hollow echo that had started it all. And across from him, In the opposite corner, his opponent materialized once more. But this time, Ali could see the face clearly. It was his own face, but older, marked by years of punishment and struggle. The other Ali moved with the same fluid grace that had made him famous, but there was something mechanical about it, as if he were following a script written long ago. "You can't win this one," the other Ali said, his voice carrying across the ring with perfect clarity. "Time always wins in the end." "I've never lost a fight I didn't choose to lose," Ali replied, raising his gloves. "And I ain't starting now." The two men circled each other, mirror images separated by years and experience. The younger Ali threw a jab, but the older one slipped it easily, countering with a right hand that connected with devastating accuracy. The impact sent Ali stumbling backward, but instead of pain, he felt something else entirely. He felt the weight of every punch he had ever thrown, every round he had ever fought, every victory and defeat compressed into a single moment. The clock's ticking grew faster, more urgent, and Ali realized that each tick was taking something from him. A memory, a moment, a piece of the man he had been. He could feel himself becoming lighter, less substantial, as if he were fading away 1 second at a time. "What is this place?" he demanded. But the other Ali just smiled sadly. "This is where fighters come when they've fought their last fight," he said. "This is where time catches up with everyone, even the greatest." Ali threw another combination, but his punches seemed to pass right through his opponent. The other Ali wasn't really there, he realized. None of this was really there. The gym, the ring, the darkness beyond the windows. It was all some kind of elaborate dream or hallucination, a creation of his own mind trying to make sense of something that couldn't be understood. But if it wasn't real, why did it feel so important? Why did every tick of that backward-moving clock feel like a countdown to something final and irreversible? The answer came to him slowly, like dawn breaking over a landscape he had never seen before. This wasn't about boxing, not really. This was about time itself, about the relentless march of seconds and minutes and hours that no amount of skill or determination could defeat. Every fighter eventually faced this opponent, this invisible enemy that couldn't be hit or hurt or intimidated. The lights above the ring began to dim, and Ali could feel the gym starting to dissolve around him. The walls became transparent, the floor beneath his feet turned to mist, and the clock's ticking faded to a whisper. But instead of fear, he felt a strange sense of peace. He had spent his entire career fighting opponents who could be beaten, who could be outmaneuvered and outthought and outlasted. But time was different. Time was patient and persistent and absolutely fair. It gave everyone the same number of seconds in each minute, the same number of minutes in each hour. What you did with those moments was up to you. But eventually, everyone's time ran out. As the gym faded completely away, Ali found himself standing in a place that wasn't quite darkness and wasn't quite light. The other Ali was still there, but now he looked younger, more like the man Ali remembered being in his prime. They stood facing each other, no longer opponents, but something closer to old friends meeting after a long separation. "So what happens now?" Ali asked. "Now you understand," the other Ali replied. "The fight was never about winning or losing. It was about how you fought, how you carried yourself, how you treated the time you were given." Ali nodded, finally comprehending what had taken him so long to see. Every round in that empty gym had been a lesson. Every punch thrown and received had been preparation for this moment of understanding. Time wasn't his enemy after all. Time was simply the arena in which all of life's real battles were fought. The bell echoed one final time, but now it sounded different. Not hollow and ominous, but clear and clean, like the bell that had started his very first professional fight all those years ago. It was the sound of a new round beginning, not an old one ending. Ali opened his eyes and found himself back in his own bedroom, sunlight streaming through the windows, his wife sleeping peacefully beside him. The digital clock on the nightstand showed 6:30 in the morning, and he could hear the familiar sounds of the neighborhood waking up outside. Cars starting, dogs barking, children laughing as they waited for the school bus. He sat up slowly, his body stiff from sleep, but feeling more rested than he had in months. The dream, or vision, or whatever it had been, was already starting to fade, but the lesson remained crystal clear. Time wasn't something to be fought or feared or resented. Time was a gift, each moment precious and irreplaceable, each day an opportunity to do something meaningful with the hours he had been given. Ali got out of bed and walked to the window, looking out at the world that was very much alive and moving forward. Somewhere in the distance he could hear the faint sound of a bell, but this time it didn't fill him with dread. It was just marking time, counting off the seconds and minutes and hours that made up a life well lived. He had been the heavyweight champion of the world, had faced down opponents who seemed unbeatable, had overcome obstacles that would have stopped lesser men. But his greatest victory, he now understood, wasn't any of those fights. His greatest victory was learning to make peace with time itself, to accept its passage without bitterness or regret. The sun climbed higher in the sky, and Ali smiled as he watched the world wake up around him. There were still rounds to be fought, still challenges to face, still moments to be lived. But now he knew the secret that had eluded him for so long. The bell that echoed across the empty world wasn't announcing the end of the fight. It was announcing that the fight, the real fight, was just beginning. And Muhammad Ali, the man who had floated like a butterfly and stung like a bee, was ready for whatever came next. Time had taught him its greatest lesson, and he was finally prepared to be its student rather than its opponent. The clock would keep ticking, the moments would keep passing, but he would meet each one with the same courage and grace that had defined his career in the ring. Because in the end, that was what it meant to be truly great. Not to defeat time, but to dance with it, to move in rhythm with its eternal beat, to make every second count for something larger than yourself. The bell had echoed across the empty world, and Muhammad Ali had finally learned to listen to what it was really trying to tell him.